mining season in the Yukon had already been rough and demanding, and the crew had faced long days, cold nights, and endless pressure. But after episode 5 of season 16, everything changed in a way no one expected. The operation had already been working harder than most years, but by this point, Parker and his entire team were pushed right up to the edge. 3 wash plants were running day and night without slowing down, and every person on the crew was doing everything they could to keep things moving. It was the kind of week that broke weaker crews. But for Parker's team, it became the week that would set a new level of success for the entire season. Each plant needed fuel, repairs, manpower, and constant attention. The machines never slept, and the crew hardly slept either. Everyone knew that keeping 3 plants running for 7 straight days was a huge risk. The amount of money spent on diesel alone was enough to make anyone nervous, but Parker believed it was the only way to hit the season goals. And when the week finally ended, the crew walked into the gold room with the kind of tired excitement that only miners understand. They were exhausted, but deep down they knew something big might be coming. The atmosphere in the gold room felt different, almost electric, like everyone could feel the weight of what they were about to see. Before the first pan even touched the scale, there was a mix of tension and hope in the air. Parker stood with his crew, including Tyson, Mitch, Chris, Bob, and the rest of the team. Their faces showed a mix of nerves and pride. They all knew exactly how hard the week had been, and they all hoped it had been worth the pain, the long hours, and the constant pressure. Last week's total of 527 ounces had been solid. They were proud of it. But after running 3 plants wide open for 7 days straight, they hoped to break past that number. They just did not know how far past it they were about to go. The first cleanup came from Roxane and Tyson's plant at the Sulphur Cut. The ground at Sulphur had looked promising earlier in the season, but no one expected it to be as rich as it turned out to be. Tyson had spent the entire week pushing the plant harder than ever, and he joked that he had spent more time with Roxane than with anyone else. Everyone laughed, but when Tyson admitted that the cleanup was so big he couldn't even fit all the gold into the normal containers, the room went quiet for a moment. He said he had to hide extra gold in his thermos because the scale tray couldn't hold it all. At first, the crew thought he was joking, but then Tyson lifted the thermos, and the disbelief began to spread. When the first pan from Sulphur hit the scale, gold poured out in a thick, steady sheet. It looked like someone had opened a waterfall of yellow metal. The pan filled fast, and when the numbers stopped moving, the screen read exactly 300 ounces. The room erupted with shock, but Chris wasn't done. He reached into his bag and pulled out the thermos. Everyone gasped and started laughing in disbelief. When the extra gold was added to the pan, the total jumped past 350 ounces. That meant that Sulphur alone had produced over $1.25 million in gold in just 1 week. The Sulphur Cut had instantly become one of the richest spots Parker had ever worked. Tyson stared at the pile with amazed eyes, knowing that cleanups like this were the reason they pushed so hard every year. Everyone in the room understood that this week was not normal. Something bigger was happening. After that incredible start, the team moved to the second cleanup. This one came from Bob, the steady and reliable wash plant working the Dominion Bridge Cut. Bob's operator worked hard, without drama, without complaints, and without seeking attention. Bob was known for consistency, and consistency is gold in the mining world. When Chris dumped Bob's concentrate into the pan, the gold flowed out clean and even. It settled into a nice round pile that told the crew that Bob had once again done its job. The final total landed just under 200 ounces. It was not shocking or surprising like the Sulphur Cut, but it was dependable and strong. Parker was happy because every ounce counted and every cleanup mattered. Dominion had proved once again that it was reliable ground. But the moment everyone was waiting for was the third cleanup, the one from Slucifer at the Golden Mile. This was the heart of Parker's entire season. The Golden Mile was supposed to be the pay streak that carried the operation. It was the area Parker had put major trust and money into. After running the plant full throttle all week, hopes were incredibly high. As Chris brought in the pans from Slucifer, the room got quiet again. Everyone leaned forward, waiting to see what the golden mile would reveal. When the first scoop of gold landed in the pan, the excitement came back instantly. The gold kept coming in scoop after scoop. It piled up fast, thicker and heavier than anyone expected. The room fell silent as the gold mound grew larger and larger. By the time the last ounces were added, the total had passed 260 ounces. That meant the Golden Mile alone had produced around $1.6 million worth of gold in 1 week. It was a massive success. When all 3 plants were added together, the final number appeared on the scale: 881.5 ounces in a single week. Over $2.5 million in raw gold. The entire room froze, staring at the large digital number. Even Parker looked shocked, and he was not someone who got surprised easily. The number destroyed last week's total of 527 ounces. It was one of the biggest weekly cleanups Parker had ever recorded in his entire career. The crew could hardly believe what they were seeing. To understand how big this week was, Parker reminded everyone that at this same time last season, the entire operation had only produced 288 ounces. That meant that just one of this week's plants had beaten the total from last year. The whole team had now produced more than 2,000 ounces for the season so far, worth more than $7 million. And more than 1/3 of that gold had come from this single week. Chris joked that if they kept this up, the season was going to be one for the history books. Parker laughed and said they only needed to repeat that same week about 10 more times, plus a few extra for good measure. The gold sat on the table in a shining mountain. Someone in the room joked that they should hand out gold pans like party favors. People laughed, but beneath the laughter was a serious understanding. This amount of gold was life-changing for the season. The achievement was huge, and everyone could feel it. Parker stood there staring at the piles of gold. He said it almost did not feel real. Seeing that much gold at once had a strange effect. It was almost hypnotic. But then his focus shifted from admiration to responsibility. He reminded the team that every bit of the gold needed to go directly into the safe. No exceptions. When that much gold is on the table, security becomes extremely important. This week was a major turning point. The huge cleanup did more than boost morale. It changed the whole direction of the season. The risk of running 3 plants had paid off in the biggest way possible. It showed that the crew's hard work, long nights, and dedication were worth it. It proved that the strategy, the investment, and the commitment were working. The cleanup showed that this season might become one of the best in Parker's entire mining career. Fans watching from home had never seen something like this. The weigh-in created shock, excitement, and history all in one moment. As Parker locked away the $2.5 million worth of gold, everyone understood that this week was not just a good week. It was a statement. It showed the world that Parker and his crew were operating on a different level. They had changed what was possible in 1 week of mining. Season 16 was already intense, but after this week, the story changed completely. The stakes were now higher, the operation was bigger, and Parker's goals were clearer than ever. This cleanup opened a new chapter. Now every choice Parker made mattered. Every decision about equipment, manpower, and ground could change the season. The pressure became heavier, but the opportunity became greater. Fans who had watched Parker grow from a teenager into a major mine boss could see that this season felt special. The risks were huge, but the rewards were even bigger. Every cleanup from now on had the chance to be another record breaker. Every day on the claim could swing the season one way or another, and every hour of machine work mattered. Season 16 was not slowing down, it was speeding up, and Parker found himself right in the center of the biggest and most ambitious run of his life.
Also raised the bar for what needed to happen next. You cannot pull $2.5 million in a single week and then slow down. Once the crew reached that level, they knew they had to keep pushing, because they had proven what they were capable of. The next morning, the machines fired up again before sunrise. The crew gathered around the cook shack for breakfast, their faces tired but brighter than usual. Even the people who normally stayed quiet were talking more. They joked about the thermos full of gold and how Chris almost dropped the pan from shock. But beneath the laughter was a strong feeling of responsibility. The season goals were huge, and now they seemed possible. The week had not just changed their mood, it had changed their expectations of themselves. Every miner knows that success brings pressure, and this success brought a lot of it. Parker walked around the claim with a notebook in his hand, making new plans. He studied the maps, the ground conditions, the fuel charts, and the repair schedules. He kept running the numbers in his head. He now had to decide whether to keep all 3 plants running at full power or adjust the plan to avoid burning out the crew and the machines too early. Running 3 plants was expensive. One mistake, one big breakdown, or one patch of bad ground could erase thousands of dollars in a single hour. But after the massive cleanup, slowing down felt wrong. He knew he had to make the right call because the rest of the season depended on it. Tyson headed back to the sulfur cut with a renewed sense of pride. The ground there had shocked everyone, including him. The crew now looked at sulfur like it was a gold factory. Every shovelful of dirt, every bucket, and every ton of pay they dug up felt like it could be part of another incredible cleanup. But with more pressure came more focus. Tyson checked every line on the plant, looked at the belts, the shaker deck, and the feed rate. He wanted to avoid anything that could ruin the momentum. He knew the sulfur cut had changed the season, but it could also turn on them at any moment. Mining is simple. One week you strike gold, and the next week you might find nothing. Across the claim, Bob at the Dominion cut started its engines again. Dominion had always been the steady ground, the backbone of the operation. It did not produce monster cleanups like sulfur or the Golden Mile, but it never failed. The crew loved working Dominion because it was predictable. When everything else was chaotic, Dominion was calm. The ground fed smoothly into the plant, and the gold always came out steady. Parker respected that. He knew that big numbers made the show exciting, but consistent numbers kept the operation alive. Dominion was like the quiet hero of the season. Over at the Golden Mile, the team prepared Slucifer for another long day. They checked water flow, screens, mats, and pumps. The Golden Mile had just produced more than 260 ounces in 1 week, and that meant expectations were now sky high. Everyone could feel it. The Golden Mile was no longer just an important part of the operation, it had become the heart of the season. If it kept producing at this level, the season could break records. But the Golden Mile was old ground with a long history.
Surprises. Sometimes good, sometimes bad. The miners working there knew they had to stay sharp. As the day went on, the weather changed. Clouds rolled over the mountains and cast shadows across the cuts. The Yukon could turn difficult in seconds, and everyone kept an eye on the sky. Rain could shut everything down. Mud could slow the plants to a crawl. Even a short storm could cause thousands in lost gold. The crew moved faster, trying to get as much done as possible before the weather turned. The sound of machines echoed across the valley, and the ground shook under the weight of trucks hauling load after load of pay dirt. Inside the excavators, the operators talked over the radio. They discussed the ground, the bedrock, the flow of material, and the rate of production. It was not just work, it was teamwork at its finest. If one operator fed the plant too fast, it could overload and shut down. If someone fed too slow, they wasted time. This balance was the heart of mining. And after the massive cleanup, the team was more focused than ever on doing things right. As the sun dropped lower, Parker gathered the key members of the team for a meeting. They sat around a table covered with maps and production charts. Parker spoke about the season goals, the current totals, and the momentum they had built. He reminded the crew that a single mistake could cost them heavily. He also reminded them that they were now on track for one of the biggest seasons they had ever had. The mood in the room was serious but motivated. Every person understood the weight of the task ahead. Later that evening, the light from the camp shone across the claim. The sound of generators hummed through the darkness. The night shift prepared to take over, and the day shift headed to rest. But sleep did not come easily. Their minds still replayed the sight of the gold on the scale, the huge mound of yellow metal, the impossible number blinking on the screen. The thought of it kept everyone energized. It became a source of fuel stronger than diesel. But with big gold came new challenges. Machines started to show the strain from running nonstop. Filters clogged faster. Hoses wore out quicker. Bolts shook loose. The mechanics worked under bright shop lights, wiping sweat from their faces while fixing problem after problem. They knew that if even one plant went down for too long, the entire operation would suffer. They worked fast, focused, and without complaints. Meanwhile, security around the camp tightened. After pulling over $2.5 million in 7 days, they could not afford to take risks. Locks were checked, cameras were tested, keys were controlled. The crew treated the gold like it was alive, like it needed protection at all times. The safe became one of the most important places on the claim. As days passed, the pressure grew heavier. Every cleanup after that massive week felt like it carried the weight of the season. Every pan mattered, every ounce mattered, and every decision Parker made became more important. But the team kept moving forward, driven by the memory of that incredible week. Season 16 had turned into something different, something bigger, something more intense. The risks were enormous, but so were the rewards. And deep down, every miner on the claim believed that the best moments of the season were still ahead. The next morning, the camp awoke to a clear sky. The previous week's record-breaking haul had set the tone, but it also set the expectations. Everyone moved with purpose.
Quick, and the crews got ready for another long day. Parker had already studied the numbers overnight and planned the day down to every detail. Fuel trucks were loaded, heavy equipment checked, and each plant operator knew their role. Every detail mattered now. After pulling $2.5 million in just 1 week, there was no room for mistakes. Parker knew the crew had the skills, but even the best teams can fail if they lose focus. This day, like all days, demanded full attention. Tyson headed back to the sulfur cut with a renewed determination. The ground had been generous, but it was also tricky. While some sections poured out gold easily, other patches slowed production or caused the plant to jam. Tyson watched every load, every bucket, every ounce of pay. He adjusted the speed of the feed, monitored the water pressure, and kept a close eye on the shaker deck. The crew worked as a single unit. If one person made a mistake, it could cost hours of production. Yet, after the previous week, they moved with confidence, knowing that they could handle the challenges. Over at Dominion, Bob's plant ran like clockwork. The steady production reminded Parker that consistency mattered as much as big numbers. Dominion never had flashy cleanups, but it had a reliable output, and that reliability meant Parker could plan ahead. While the other cuts were producing record-breaking numbers, Dominion quietly added value. Parker walked along the plant line inspecting belts, water flow, and collection pans. He smiled at the efficiency. Dominion might not make headlines, but it was the backbone that kept the operation alive. Meanwhile, at the Golden Mile, the pace was intense. Slucifer's plant had proven itself the week before, and now everyone knew how valuable that cut could be. The plant operators carefully measured every scoop, watched the flow of gold-rich gravel, and adjusted the speed to maximize recovery. Each bucket seemed heavier than the last. The team could feel the energy in the air. They knew the ground had already rewarded them once, but the Golden Mile had more to give, and it was up to them to get every ounce. The tension was high, but so was the excitement. This was the kind of week every miner dreams about. By mid-morning, the machines were running non-stop. Trucks hauled pay dirt across the claim, dump trucks backed into plants, and excavators loaded buckets with precision. The rhythm was constant, like a heartbeat. Every team member understood that the clock was ticking. Every ounce of gold extracted now added to the massive totals Parker had started the week with. The ground had proven generous, but it would not wait forever. If they slowed down, they would lose precious time and gold. Parker's leadership kept everyone on track, but the physical and mental demands were enormous. Exhaustion crept in, but the crews pushed through. By noon, the first partial cleanups were ready for weighing.
Tyson's sulfur cut had already produced more than anyone expected. The scale blinked, and the numbers were staggering. Every cleanup seemed larger than before. The piles of gold sparkled under the fluorescent lights.
Off the worn metal of pans and trays, crew members exchanged glances of disbelief. They had worked hard, and the ground had rewarded them beyond imagination. Yet there was no time to celebrate. Parker reminded the crew that each ounce counted, and the week was far from over. One mistake now could undo all the progress they had made. Dominion's steady production continued to impress. Bob's cut consistently added value, building the total ounce count steadily. Unlike the flashy sulfur and golden mile plants, Dominion showed the importance of reliability. Parker knew that a season could only succeed when the reliable cuts supported the riskier, high-yield areas. He walked the plant line, nodding at the operators. Every person understood their role perfectly, and that precision made a huge difference. Even small errors could have cascading effects on the total output, so the crew worked with extreme focus. At the Golden Mile, the work was relentless. Each scoop of gravel seemed heavier than the last, filled with coarse flakes and sparkling nuggets. The excitement grew with every bucket. The operators watched carefully as gold poured into pans, filling them faster than ever before. This cut had already proven its worth, and the team knew there was more to recover. The sense of history hung over them. Pulling gold from the Golden Mile was special. Each bucket connected them to the land, to past miners, and to the incredible story of what the Yukon had hidden underground. It was more than just gold. It was a reminder of why they worked so hard every day. By late afternoon, the teams paused briefly to regroup and refuel the equipment. Lunch was short, just enough to rest and keep energy levels high. Parker gathered the key crew members and reviewed the day's progress. Charts, numbers, and maps spread across the table. He spoke about priorities, upcoming cleanups, and potential trouble spots. Everyone listened intently. No one doubted the importance of planning. The week had already set records, but there was still more gold to recover. Parker's instructions were precise. Every step mattered. Every choice could impact the total production. As the afternoon faded into evening, the sun cast long shadows over the claim. Exhausted crews moved efficiently. Machines hummed, and trucks continued to haul pay dirt to plants. The day had been long, but production remained high. Every cleanup reinforced the success of the previous week. The crew could feel the difference in the atmosphere. Confidence had grown, but so had responsibility. Everyone knew that after pulling $2.5 million in 7 days, expectations were now sky high. The pressure to keep performing was intense, but the memory of the last cleanup kept them motivated. Success had given them energy. They refused to let it slip away. As darkness fell, the camp lit up with bright lights. Generators hummed, machines cooled, and crews gathered for a short break. The gold from the day was secured, and the safe was locked once again. The security measures were tighter than ever because the haul was worth millions. Even a small mistake could have serious consequences, and everyone took their responsibilities seriously. Mining is not just about gold. It is about control, planning, and precision. 1 week of record-breaking gold changed the mindset of every person at Good
Claim. By nightfall, the camp was quiet but alert. Machines were parked, crews rested, and Parker walked along the perimeter. He thought about the week, the total gold produced, and the challenges ahead. He knew the season was far from over. If they kept up this pace, They could break records beyond imagination, but they also had to remain careful. Fatigue, equipment failure, and unpredictable ground conditions were constant threats. Every decision Parker made would now carry more weight. The week had proven what was possible, but it had also raised the stakes higher than ever before. Season 16 had become a test of endurance, skill, and strategy, and Parker and his crew were ready to face it. The following morning, the camp buzzed with energy again. The previous week's success had boosted